Hey, what's going on, y'all? The Bills season's come to an end. Heck of a run, man. What a push to end the season for the boys. Obviously, it's not the outcome we wanted. It seems like we just cannot get over that Chiefs hump in the playoffs. I don't know what it is, but it's another year, another early exit. But for where this team was, middle of the season, didn't even look like the playoffs were going to happen in general, let alone winning the division, let alone being the 2 seed, hosting 2 playoff games. Man, it was a good push to end the season by the boys. They played as hard as, a lot of those guys' bodies would go. I mean, shoot, by the time we got to the Kansas City game, Buffalo's defense was it was a shell of what they were all season. I mean, yes, everybody deals with injuries. That's not an excuse. I get it. But, man, I don't know if there was a team in the NFL on one side of the ball who suffered and lost as many guys as the Bills defense did this season. I mean, you lose a guy like Trey White early in the year. He's done for the season. Then the very next week, you lose Matt Milano, who is one of, I'd say, probably a top 4 linebacker in the NFL. You lose him for the season. I mean, those are your 2, big household names that are done for the season, after 4 or 5 weeks. But, the guys that came in to replace them, they played their tails off. Terrell Bernard, the guy really came into his own this year. He gets hurt in that Pittsburgh game. Can't go, for the Kansas City game. That's a huge loss. Tyrel Dotson, another guy who stepped up to fill that void. With injuries and whatnot, he played good. And then he got banged up. And then you bring in a guy like Balen Spector, and he's a glorified backup this season, but he came in and he played his tail off. AJ Klein, a guy that was sitting on the couch, prior to the Pittsburgh playoff game, and Buffalo calls him up. He comes in and he was a stud in that game. Not so much the Kansas City game. Still not sure why they had him drop back into coverage on some plays, but again, just the injuries at key positions was obviously a big factor. It left the middle of the field open for Mahomes and Kelsey to do their thing, and they did their thing. And the Bills defense just could not get a stop. So, but yeah, it was impressive that they got as far as they did with what they had, and the run that they went on. Like I said, the division, was pretty much, heck, you can go back and watch my videos. I had pretty much conceded the division to Miami. Who wouldn't? They had a 3-game lead with 4 weeks to play and squandered it. And credit to the Bills. They rallied. They got their mindset, I guess, shifted, after they, rallied off a couple big wins, and they went and took the division. And, it's obviously not a successful season if you're not hosting the Lombardi, but, if you look at it from how the team bounced back and responded and rallied around each other. You rallied off 6 straight wins, 5 of which to end the season, win the division, get the 2 seed, host a playoff game, you win that one, and then you finally get Kansas City at home. It wasn't meant to be yet again for the Bills. But there's always next season. We always say that, but there's always next season. Still going to have Josh Allen as quarterback. no matter what anybody in this league or that covers this league says about that man, he is a top 2 quarterback in the NFL. It's Mahomes and Allen, and I don't care what anybody else says. They're the 2 clear best players, and anybody that says otherwise they're wrong. they're just ignorant to the game and don't watch nearly enough, tape or what have you. But I mean, I could do a whole separate video on just sticking up for Josh Allen, but we'll do a brief Bills season recap. I contemplated doing a Chiefs recap, but I was so sick to my stomach after, losing sucks. Obviously, losing in the playoffs sucks. But man, I am so tired of losing to the Chiefs. I'm so tired of Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift. I'm sick of them, and it wasn't going to be a good video. Wouldn't have been productive. It would have just been, ranting and raving and what have you. So decided to skip that one. Give me a week or so to cool off and look back at the Bills season and give my thoughts on some things and looking towards 2024 and maybe give a little early prediction for next year. But I've touched on it a little bit already. They hit a lull there after they came out of the gates. Primetime game, opening game against, what was supposed to be Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets. Obviously, Rodgers goes down, and then they're facing Zach Wilson, and they managed to squander that game, lose it, in overtime. And, after that, though, man, that offense, that team, they looked like the team we thought they were. They, beat up on, their next couple opponents. And then welcome Miami to town in an early matchup in Orchard Park. Normally it's reversed. Normally Buffalo goes to Miami early in the season, and then Miami comes to Buffalo in the winter months, and that kind of has been, the balancing act of the two, polar opposite weather factors. But this year the NFL had them swapped, and Miami came to Buffalo in the fall, and Buffalo put a whooping on them. They obviously at the time they had a healthy, fully stacked defense, and they shut down Miami. That was a game that, the week prior they had dropped 70 points on Denver, and then they come into Buffalo, and after, the Bills and Dolphins traded punches on the first couple drives, the Bills defense shut them out in the second half, and, Buffalo whooped them, and it was, I think, a big reminder, to the division on who ran it and who they had to go through to win the division. And, then the following week, Buffalo has to travel to London. And that, I've been very vocal. I don't like the London games. I don't like the Germany games. I don't like the Mexico series games. I think they're doing Brazil next season. I don't like any of these foreign games. It's too big of a nuisance to these teams. They're based here. Everything's here. And now you're going to pack up and put people on a plane and fly them hours and hours and hours to another part in the world and then ask them to perform at a high level. Not a fan of them. But anyway, that game, Buffalo just, man, they were flat. Jacksonville, they had a bit of an advantage, if I can talk. They had a bit of an advantage. They played in London the week prior. So they were acclimated. They stayed there all week. Meanwhile, Sean McDermott makes the, decision to keep Buffalo in Buffalo for the week, and then, fly all the way across to London, the Friday before the game, and gave his team no time to acclimate, get used to the time change, get used to the playing surface, get, whatever else. And The Bills looked flat, and not only that, but that was, like I said, that was the game that they lost Matt Milano in, and there were a lot of players bashing the turf and the field and the playing conditions and what have you there, because there were players on both sides that went down, and obviously it hurt Buffalo more because they lost Milano, and then that same game, Daquan Jones tears his pec, he's out most of the season. We get him back for the playoff push in the playoffs, which was nice to have him back, but we lost two huge guys there, and it seemed like that was kind of the downfall of the Ken Dorsey-led offense. Just for the rest of his tenure, for the next handful of games, man, that offense just struggled. And I really think, from what everybody says about him, he's very, very smart. Obviously, he was a quarterback in his own right, had success playing college ball. He's a very smart guy, but I think he was a detriment to himself at points. I think he was too smart for his own good, if that makes any sense, where he was overcomplicating things and trying to, he was trying so hard to outsmart the opponent that he was making things way harder than they needed to be. It was also during that time of the season where they were very vocal about they didn't want Josh Allen to run. They didn't want him, to take off. They didn't want to have these designed quarterback runs. And for as good as Josh Allen is, his escapability and his ability to extend plays and keep broken plays alive and things like that, man, when you coach that out of a guy, you're asking for trouble. And it was a shame that it went like it did, especially because the season prior, Buffalo, they went 13-3, and they looked very, they looked like a team that wasn't going through a OC change. Obviously they lost Brian Daboll to the Giants, so then they promote Dorsey, and it looked like the Bills hadn't lost a step. And then for whatever reason, towards the end of that season, and then obviously after the London game this season, it just kind of seemed like it just quit working for them, and they were losing games that they shouldn't have lost. They lose that New England game. Obviously the Denver game was the one that that ended up costing him his job, but it wasn't pretty there for a while, and also during that stretch, that's whenever you got the McDermott's got to be the next one gone. I was one of those people. I'm still kind of on the fence about McDermott. It's another season where we don't get to where this team should be, and I don't know at this point what else he can do. But yeah, they make the OC change. They promote Joe Brady from quarterbacks coach to offensive coordinator, and then the next handful of games, the Bills are putting up 30 points a game on top defenses and winning games, and they just about went into Philadelphia and beat the Eagles. They're a couple flags away from winning that game. But yeah, I mean, they just look like a totally different team with Joe Brady calling the plays. Obviously, they put the trust back in Josh to be smart with his running, and didn't overcomplicate what did need to be complicated. And Josh Allen rewarded him. Like I said, after they lose the heartbreaker in Philly, they go on their bye, and then they come out. They go to Arrowhead. They beat the Chiefs. And then they return home, and then Dallas comes to town, and Dallas at the time was one of the top NFC teams, and they absolutely stomped Dallas. And I think those were the two games that really put, I think Joe Brady's name, comfortably in the conversation to be, the full-time OC in 2024. Obviously, the time I'm recording this, it's been announced he is now the new official offensive coordinator. So, that's something to look forward to in Buffalo. But, obviously, they go on the run. They take the division from Miami, host the two playoff games. We touched on all that. The other thing I've touched on in previous videos, if you haven't watched any of the other Bills recap videos, I encourage you, go check them out. Tell me your thoughts on, games that maybe I missed a point, missed something. But the Bills' lack of a true wide receiver too, I think, really, really hurt them. You saw it. You saw it more towards the end of the season. Whenever a play needed to be made, it seemed like Josh Allen, more times than not, was going to try and make a play with his feet. And it's because, one, down the stretch, Stephon Diggs became very unreliable. You can go back to that Chiefs game. I mean, a huge drop late in the game that would have set Buffalo up in just prime position late in the game. But not just that drop. I mean, he had a handful of drops throughout the season, very Diggs like, and he really fell off. And then, like I've said all season long, just Gabe Davis is not a wide receiver two in this league. Maybe on another football team he could be, but on the Bills he's not. Teams, once they take Diggs away, Josh has got to, try and find his next, favorite target, and Davis is another guy that just he has a bad case of the drops in big spots, and then after Gabe Davis, normally he would look for Dawson Knox, and again, another guy. He'll make you play, but he will drop passes in big spots, and he had a couple of them this season in big spots. Dalton Kincaid, he started to definitely gain some trust from Josh. Definitely saw his targets pick up later in the season, and then obviously the guy that showed up in the playoffs and towards the end of the season was Khalil Shakir. I think going forward, obviously now that Gabe Davis isn't under contract for next season, you got to figure Shakir's probably going to be the number 2 receiver unless Buffalo goes out and drafts somebody or makes a trade somewhere along the line. But Josh likes him. I know people in the building like him. Obviously, Brandon Beane drafted him, so you got to figure that Shakir will be the number 2 next season. But outside of that, everybody else was kind of on a 1-year deal. Like Trent Sherfield. He was on a 1-year deal. He's a free agent now. He was kind of a wasted signing, in my opinion. I mean, outside of the Miami Week 18 game, you didn't really see him at all throughout the season. He was a guy that I think people had a lot of hope for because, when he was with Miami, he was kind of the third guy outside of Waddle and Hill last year, but he didn't really do a whole lot. And they have a guy, Justin Shorter, that they drafted this past year, who was on IR most of the season. He's a big wide receiver that they really liked. Obviously he'll get looks in camp. He'll probably crack the roster spot if I'd have to guess. But Buffalo, I mean, they have to draft a wide receiver in the first round. They they desperately need help in that area, and it's obviously they have needs elsewhere. The defensive line, they really need to get a difference maker there. Obviously, the Bills have a lot of free agents on the defensive side of the ball. Leonard Floyd, who was a late signing, but he was a huge difference maker this year. I think he ended with 10.5 sacks. He was on a 1-year prove-it deal, so odds are he probably won't be back in Buffalo, just because Buffalo has, at the moment, they're $40 million over the cap space for next season. Obviously, based on projections, they're like 2 or 3 restructures away from getting under the cap hit, but they're definitely not sitting in a spot where they're going to go out and sign a big name free agent. That's why I don't think you'll see Gabe Davis come back. He's gonna have a high asking price, and it'll be just because of that Chiefs playoff game in 2021, and somebody will pay him. Some team, you could see, a team like maybe Washington, pair him with Terry out there. They've got what I think the number 2 pick, new owner, new coach, new regime. He could fit in there. It wouldn't surprise me if he got looks within the division as well. A lot of those Jets guys that came over from Green Bay, they were on one year deal too, type thing. So maybe he goes there and plays with Aaron Rodgers. I wouldn't surprise me if he stayed in the division that way either. But don't expect Buffalo to go out and sign a big name free agent. They have a ton of money tied up in Von Miller now that his contract's starting to hit. That signing is going to be one of the biggest. For as good as Brandon Beane has been as the GM of the Bills, that is going to come back to be maybe the biggest waste of just a roster spot, of cap space, of money in general. If the Bills don't win a Super Bowl during this Josh Allen window, during his prime, that could be definitely one of the signage you look back and point to and be like, well, the Bills wasted so much money on him that they couldn't go out and get him somebody, and they'd have an argument there. So a ton of money tied up in Vaughn. Obviously, they got a ton of money tied up in Trey. There's no even guarantee that Trey comes back and plays ever again. I don't think he'll go out like this, but after having 2 big injuries in like 2 of the last 3 seasons, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Buffalo tries and recoup some of that money. They have a lot tied up into him too, and it's going to be a challenge on the defensive side of the ball. They're going to have to get creative, obviously, in the draft. If for some reason they don't go wide receiver in round 1, like I said, I'd expect D-line to be where they go, either D-line or possibly corner or safety. Obviously Micah Hyde, he's another name on the defense that his contract's up. From all the posts on social media from his wife and even from him and comments and whatnot, doesn't sound like he'll be back in Buffalo. There's rumors that he's even contemplating retirement in general. So Buffalo will need help in the secondary. They'll need help with their pass rush. AJ Epinesa, a guy they drafted. They didn't pick up his option, and so now he's a free agent this season. He had a pretty good season. He fell off at points, but there were definitely games where he showed that he could be a player in this league if he's given the right opportunity. So I expect him to get some money somewhere. Coming back to Buffalo doesn't sound like it'll happen for him either. Daquan Jones, a guy I've already talked about. He's a free agent. The defensive side of the ball is going to be interesting. Obviously, I'm recording this on Tuesday, so the news broke this morning that Sean McDermott is not going to be the defensive coordinator and head coach next season. He's just going to be the head coach. The Bills are promoting their linebacker coach, Bobby B., up to be the new defensive coordinator, a young guy that, he's been with the Bills since 2017, kind of worked his way up. He's known Sean McDermott since, I think they said, like 2011, something like that. So he's a younger guy. All the players on defense love him. There's already been tweets, from players, excited, pumped up to have him leading the defense. So, the Bills got that going for him. But player-wise, this will be where we see what Brandon Meek can do. Working with the cap, seeing what he can do in the draft. Buffalo has a good number of draft picks this year, so I don't know if they do a little trading or if they just really try and hit their draft picks this year. But the defense will definitely have a new look to it next year. But thankfully, we'll get Matt Milano back. Hopefully, he'll still be the same stud he was before he got hurt. Same with Terrell Bernard. But I don't see many changes on special teams. I do anticipate them bringing in some competition for Tyler Bass, not just because he missed the kick in the Kansas City game, but he had a very, very down year. He missed a good amount of field goals that he should have made, and they weren't just like misses. Like, they were like, a couple of them were shanks, and it's almost like at that point, he's in his head, and for a kicker, it's kind of almost like a golfer. Once you get in your own head, you're in trouble. So I would anticipate Buffalo bringing in. I would anticipate a veteran kicker. I don't think they would draft a kicker. Obviously, they drafted Bass, so they're not opposed to drafting a kicker, but they like him. He's obviously been there. Bills drafted him, but at some point, you can't have big kicks being missed, especially when you're at home and you need a kick to tie the football game. And it wasn't like it was a prayer, of a kick to make. It was a very makeable kick that he pushed right. So, punter-wise, I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I'll have to check, but I'm not sure if Sam Martin's under contract for next season. A name that has been floated around in Bill circles now has been Matt Araiza. Obviously he was drafted by the Bills. The Bills released him that same year after all the allegations and whatnot came out against him. But, since then he's been cleared of everything. He's been found not guilty. And he said that, people within the Bills organization have, he's been in contact with him. I don't know if that's, as a reunion type thing, or if that's just, friends he made during camp and the 2 preseason games he was in. But, there's at least that line of communication. So, wouldn't surprise me, but wouldn't surprise me, obviously, if he's not either. So, I do think that you'll see a new special teams coach. Matthew Smiley, it was a very down year for the special teams unit. Obviously, you have that Deontay Hardy punt return in Miami that totally flipped the game. But outside of that, man, the kick coverage, obviously the Denver game where we have 12 men on the field, it just was not a very good year for the special teams. So I would anticipate a new special teams coach next season. yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. But other than that, y'all, that's the few thoughts I have. You know, I could keep going, but at this point, it's so early on in the season, or in the off season for the Bills. I mean, heck, they haven't even obviously played the Super Bowl yet, so I'll leave it at that for now. I'll do after the draft and after free agency, and you know, maybe prior to the preseason, we'll do a off-season recap and, you know, thoughts on the upcoming year. I know obviously we'll probably do another video, you know, with all the other teams like we did this season, but I don't want to get too far ahead. But I will give you my prediction on the Super Bowl this year. Chiefs 49ers, the Super Bowl that absolutely nobody in the world wanted to see unless you're a Bay resident or a Kansas City fan. So I'm going to go with the Niners. I'm going to say that the Niners win the game. I'm going to say that defense bullies Patrick Mahomes. Nobody's really been able to get after him this postseason. That's really been the difference maker. You know, I don't know what the secret has been or what the change has been, you know, for the Chiefs, you know, pass protection, but they have hardly let anybody touch him this postseason, and it's given him way too much time to throw, and it's given Kelce way too much time to create separation, and that is what has bit Miami, Buffalo, and now Baltimore in the butt. So I anticipate the Niners, and if that defense, I mean, I anticipate them getting after them. Obviously, Baltimore had a really good defense too, but I'm going to say the Niners pull it off, and we don't get to see Taylor Swift on the field. But if we stick to the script, like everybody thinks we're going to stick to, Taylor will be on the field celebrating, and the NFL will be happy with all their ratings and their money. But I digress. As always, appreciate y'all for tuning in for all these rants and reviews and recaps and what have you this season. We'll see y'all maybe in a week. I think we're going to try and do a Super Bowl preview. I kind of gave you a brief just prediction, but I think we're going to try and break down the matchup a little bit more. So yeah, look out for that. And I guess until maybe August, I'll see y'all later. Appreciate you once again, and go Bills.